Students experience a number of challenges that make it difficult for them to learn and study. Parents and teachers may wonder whether these students are genuinely having a difficulty or whether they are just playing up. Father Ajoy Fernandes, who holds a doctorate in counseling psychology with a major in clinical counseling, addresses some questions that parents and teachers commonly raise in this series entitled Understanding and Helping Children with Learning Difficulties.
In the second episode of this series, I spoke about children who find it difficult to study due to challenges that they experience in their homes, schools, or neighborhood. I titled them as environmental difficulties. I also spoke about children who struggle with their studies because they have a below average level of intelligence. In this episode, I will focus on a difficulty called Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. This condition would make it difficult for children with average intelligence or even bright children to focus on their studies. An example might help viewers to understand what ADHD is all about.
Raju was an affectionate and friendly 10-year-old boy. He often moved around the classroom to speak to his classmates. He did not realize that he was interrupting his classmates while they were doing their class assignments. He would sometimes leave his pencil on their desks or walk away with their stationery without realizing that he had done so. If someone dropped a pencil, Raju would be eager to find it and pick it up. And if a crow perched itself on the window, Raju would reprimand it for cawing loudly and disturbing the class. Raju was an excellent football player. However, each time an airplane flew overhead, he would let go of the ball even if he were actively engaging with it, and often someone would shoot a goal on these occasions.
Raju was not like his classmates. What difficulty could he be experiencing?
Raju seems to have been hyperactive. He inadvertently disturbed his classmates and spoke impulsively without awaiting his turn. He seems to have been inattentive as well. He did not register questions that were being asked by the teacher, forgetfully left his pencil or took other children's stationery, could not sustain attention on a task for long, kept misplacing articles, and was very easily distracted.
Could Raju be suffering from a disorder?
Some children are hyperactive, others are inattentive. Raju had characteristics of both. However, the DSM-5 requires psychologists to confirm answers to several questions before concluding that a person has Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, or ADHD as it is commonly called. To be assessed to have a disorder, Raju would need to consistently display at least 6 symptoms of hyperactivity and or inattention mentioned in the DSM-5. These symptoms would need to have occurred across a span of 6 months or more in 2 or more settings, like in class, on the playground, when interacting with peers, or when at home. His symptoms would have to make it difficult for him to do his schoolwork, interact with others, and take part in different activities. We would also need to ensure that he was not emotionally disturbed or suffering from some other medical or psychological disorder. Our initial observation suggests that Raju had more symptoms of inattention than hyperactivity, in at least 3 settings. A psychologist would need to check whether he satisfied the DSM-5 conditions before saying that he had a disorder.
How would one be able to distinguish an active child from a hyperactive child?
There are no criteria to distinguish between the two, but a rule of thumb could be that an active child would generally engage in several productive activities, be focused on what she is doing, and complete a task she is engaged in before moving on to another task. Children who are hyperactive may indulge in activities that don't have any definite purpose. They do not complete tasks assigned to them and may disrupt the work and activity of others. They may also thoughtlessly engage in activity that is dangerous to themselves or to others. For example, they may climb up the railing on a staircase on the higher floors of a building, or might impulsively poke another child with a pencil or pen.
Could it be that children become inattentive or hyperactive because they are emotionally disturbed, trying to get the teacher's attention, or because they were not disciplined when they were small?
Emotionally disturbed children could be inattentive because they are anxious or depressed. If these symptoms reduce after undergoing therapy, they could not be said to have an ADHD attention deficit. Similarly, if the child stops displaying disruptive attention-seeking behaviors after receiving the attention she has been seeking, she might not have been suffering from ADHD hyperactivity disorder. If a child continues to display symptoms after receiving sufficient attention and therapy, it might indicate that she is genuinely suffering from either an attention deficit or from hyperactivity, or both. The parents might want to get the help of a clinical psychologist to investigate this further.
How can children with ADHD be helped?
Personal testimonies of parents as well as several researchers suggest that sensory integrative therapy, also called occupational therapy, might help to increase attention and reduce hyperactivity among smaller children. Sensory integrative therapy is administered by trained occupational therapists. We will talk about this form of therapy in a later episode. Older adolescents might take longer to benefit from sensory integrative therapy. They might need counseling and behavior therapy in addition to sensory integrative therapy. If these interventions still do not help to reduce the adolescent's symptoms, the parents might want to discuss the pros and cons of initiating medical intervention. They could consult a psychiatrist for this.
Which professionals can help children with ADHD?
A psychiatrist, pediatric neurologist, or clinical psychologist might be able to assess whether a child has ADHD or not. An occupational therapist can administer sensory integrative therapy. A psychiatrist can prescribe medication. Allow me to recapitulate briefly. In this episode, I briefly addressed questions that persons may raise concerning ADHD. I spoke about general characteristics of a person with ADHD, the conditions that need to be satisfied before concluding that a child is actually suffering from attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, tips to distinguish an active child from a hyperactive child, and ways in which a child with ADHD can be helped. A child would need to be referred to a psychologist, pediatric neurologist, or psychiatrist to obtain a professionally informed opinion. I do hope that this video has been informative and helpful. And remember that this information is compiled in order to help children and not to label them. Thanks for watching this video. I will be back to help you to understand issues associated with learning disorders. So stay with us and see you soon.